Have you ever been driving to work and you've been in your car and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm at my car park. I wonder how on earth I actually made it to work today. And you've got no recollection of the traffic lights or the traffic or who was in front of you, if there are even any sirens going on behind you. It's funny how we do that sometimes, isn't it? And the way we got to work was actually through a bunch of subconscious patterns or habits that were going on in our mind. And I'm sure a few of you can relate to that scenario. I'm sure most of us have done it from time to time. And when we think about what we're doing as leaders, there's often things we're doing in our day that we do equally as subconsciously through our own patterns and habits. And so often we're getting through our day with all of these subconscious habits that we've got going on. But some of those habits that we're doing as leaders are not as healthy as we could probably have them be. And so it's about understanding what those habits are and doing something about it. And Kirsten and I are huge fans of doing small things often so that we can make some really effective and amazing changes in our everyday life, not just at work. So today's episode is all about just that. What are some things that you can do differently so that you can build yourself up and work on your resilience and be a more effective leader in your workplace?
Okay, so now let's let you take those controls, because only you can decide and choose what you're going to do in any given moment. We think that we can multitask, but all of the neuroscience says we actually can't. Yes, we might have lots of spinning plates, but in any one given moment, we can only focus on one thing. However, I just want you to think back over the last sort of 24 hours. Have you been one of those people that you're working on a task and your mind isn't actually 100% focused on that task? It's actually focusing on, I've got to get this task done so I can move on to the next task. But when that's happening, you're not giving your best to that undivided attention that activity that you're currently working on deserves. And so what happens, we have that continual sense of overwhelm, and that cortisol is just going nuts with stress. So one of the things that is absolutely a dire craze out there at the moment, and there's a lot of research being put in, and there's actually, unfortunately, a lot of businesses being set up to help people with this addiction, and that is the addiction of distractions and the addiction, of course, with scrolling. And so what happens so often is that people now are addicted to FOMO, that fear of missing out. So what we need to be, if we really want to take the control back, if we really want to own the space and we want to make the most of the time, because we all have the same amount of time. So why is it that some people achieve more by doing less? And one of the key areas that you can achieve more by doing less is making sure that you're fully aware and self-aware of when you are addicted to distraction. And so one of the great ways of actually doing that is when you're focused on an activity and you're finding that your attention is distracted, is why not write it down beside you and then go, right, I've got 10 minutes, I'm going to focus on this, I'm going to bust this out. You know, I was doing this yesterday and I just found that I was going, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this on this project and this for this client. And I actually went, stop. I actually said in my head, stop. So I stopped, I looked up, I looked outside, and I went, take a breath, right. Okay, so write down everything that keeps coming back into your mind, write it down. Then I focused on my task. I set my alarm clock and said, I'm going to bust this out in 20 minutes, set that alarm clock, and off it went. It was just amazing. So what you've got to do is actually catch yourself when you are distracted and actually then do something about it and make yourself do a regulation, do a self-check, and then pull you back to task. So that's one of the first practical tips that I'd like to share with you. The second practical tip is about sharing this with others. And one of the really good ways of doing this is that when you're in a team meeting with your team, is actually go through a particular exercise and then ask them and frame it up really well and just say, hey, look, you know, we've just been doing this particular exercise. One of the key things that we know that is inhibiting people a lot at the moment is that their attention and the art of focusing is being lost. So let's honestly put on a post-it note, how much time were you focused on the activity that we just did or what I was just saying? Put it on a post-it note. Is that 50% of the time of me delivering that message or us going through that activity? You were focused? Was it 10%, 80%? You don't put any names on it. Fold up that post-it note, throw it in the middle. And then because there's no names, then what you can do is put those post-it notes up, and honestly, you'll probably be shocked how many people were sitting in that room that actually weren't present. But because it's anonymous, people can be truthful. That will create an amazing conversation that you can have with your team members around, okay, guys, if that's the case, then how do we work together to make sure that we show up as our best selves and are fully attentive in that given moment?
And I love that, because that attention piece is so important for each of us every moment of the day. You know, when we think about what's going on for us, we make about 35,000 decisions every single day. That's a lot. And so if we can take some of those decision processes and put them into one side, put them in a bucket where we can go back to them, imagine what that's going to do for our sense of mental well-being and getting rid of that overwhelm that Kirsten's just talked about. But it also links really nicely to the topic of habits, which I'm going to now tap into, because when we've got 35,000 decisions that we're making every day, we want to make some things easier for ourselves so that we can actually do the things that are really healthy for us and get that work done in a much easier style. Because imagine how more effective and satisfied we're going to feel if we're able to load up and get those things done. And so the first area I want to just talk to you about is your environment. And I'm going to steal Kirsten's post-it note example there, because one of the things we can do is we can put signs up also when we're thinking about habits that are unhealthy for us. We can put signs up around our computer highlighting when potentially we're losing focus. Is what I'm doing helping me achieve my goals? Really simple post-it note that you can put up there as an ongoing visual reminder. And that's what I mean by think about our environment. And actually, I used to do this all the time. I don't do it so much now, but I used to have post-it notes around my computer screen reminding me of the things that I tend to do that aren't so healthy so that I could work on changing my habits. And it works really well. Each of us are different. So I've got another habit change that you might like to look at, and it's called habit stacking. And I particularly love this one. So for example, you know, the dreaded, we go into the meeting, somebody's got to take the notes, but the notes come out the day before the next meeting. So we can do some habit stacking around these sorts of things. So for example, we go into the meeting, we complete our meeting, and for the person who's taking those minutes, the very next thing they do when they walk out of the meeting is complete those minutes. So they're stacking it on top of an action, and then they're emailing it. So we have it stacking again. So they complete an action, they do something else and follow it through. And when we have it stack, and because we're all different and work differently, it can be a really effective way of completing tasks that we're probably more likely to procrastinate on. So I love the idea of thinking about our environment, and it's my challenge to you, and what signals can you put up around yourself to remind you of some healthier ways of doing things? And also, how can you stack something into a habit that you're already doing at work that can help you complete some work or a task or something that much faster? You'll be amazed at what results you can find by just thinking about those two areas and loading in habits on top of things that you're already doing.
So this episode was all about you taking the controls, and the practical tips that Sarah and I have just shared with you, we hope you'll be able to implement immediately, because one of the key things, if we want to be the best leader that we can be the leader that people want to actually be led by, we need to make sure that we take the control and be really deliberate in what we're doing in a given day to make sure what we're doing is setting us up and creating success, not inhibiting success. Now, remember, whenever you try something new and you approach it, it is so much easier to go back into your comfort zone, into those really fluffy, boots. Whereas what we want you to do is actually, when you start to feel uncomfortable, you know you're in that growth zone. So lean into it, take that step and take back those controls. Join us in the next episode, which is our last one, which is all around resilience and you owning your space.